Hi, Holly.
Hello.
Oh, sorry, my volume. Am I working?
I can hear you.
Oh, there we go. I can hear you a bit faintly. Sorry, my tech has gone all crazy this morning, so we will get there.
No worries.
Um, Let me see. So I have made you co-host.
Perfect, thank you.
Hopefully, if you want to try sharing your screen, and then we can figure out from there how it works.
Yeah, sure. It's just always really laggy, so I'm always like, oh no, yeah, I think I panic a little bit.
No,
Uh,
understandable when you're in a big session as well. If it's easier, like if you'd rather me do the slides for you, then that's fine as well. I can do that.
Thank you. I'm just getting it to share now.
Okay, okay. Right, welcome along everyone to the launch of the Scottish Charity Regulator and Third Sector Lab social media guide for 2026. We last created one of these guides. I was looking at the date, it was back in 2015. So that has been now over a decade since the last one that we created. I know it's been used a lot in the charity sector, particularly in Scotland, but kind of UK wide. And this 2026 guide builds on that original format of that ready, steady, go format. We're going to talk about how we've kind of adapted that and changed it slightly. So we're hoping this gives you a framework for using social media in 2026 and what is a change in landscape. We're going to be joined by two guest speakers today. So Holly Took from RNIB is going to be talking about accessibility and why that is not an add-on, but is a critical part of your strategy in 2026. And Patrick Dawson from Meltwater is going to be talking all things measurement. I know Patrick's got a few other bits and bobs to talk about as well. We'll get a chance for questions, so do please keep them coming in the chat box as we go. Also, once speakers have finished speaking, and we can just unmute and ask questions as well. I'm sure you have loads of questions for people in the room. We will share a link in the chat box. I think Kaelin will do it in a wee second to the blog post where you can grab the guide for free. There's no kind of like weird email sign up walls or any of that kind of stuff. You can just go and grab a copy and start using it immediately. And we plan to create an update every quarter. We're going to commit to doing that in 2026. So hopefully, probably by the end of January, based on that kind of initial feedback, we'll get a second version of that created. Kaelin has gone through. So I did the initial write and then write up of the document. Kaelin's done the very painstaking edit on this. We've had a lot of feedback from people in the charity sector. So I think about 55 people have been involved in kind of shaping this and picking up errors and all sorts of things as we go. So if there's anything you notice or anything you'd like to see done differently, do please let us know. We're amenable to change within that. So I'm going to start. I'm going to go through just a few kind of core bits from the document and kind of, I guess, lessons learned. And then I'm going to pass on to Holly and we'll get a chance for questions after this as well. Okay, okay. Everyone see the screen okay? Wee thumbs up would be good.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Patrick. Okay, okay. So I'm Ross McCulloch. I'm the director at Third Sector Lab, and Kaelin, who's here today supporting, is also from Third Sector Lab. We are an organisation based in Scotland, but we work UK wide and we deliver lots of support for charities. So we do a lot of social media workshops with staff teams. We do lots of website builds. You might have come on our training program called The Curve, where we've trained about 15,000 people since the start of the pandemic. And we also run a program called Digital Trustees, where we're working to get people from the tech sector onto charity boards. So if you go and have a look at the Third Sector Lab website, you'll get a bit more information on that. So those of you in Scotland will be familiar that OSCR is the Scottish charity regulator. For those of you coming from the rest of the UK or potentially further afield, it is the equivalent of the charity regulator in England and Wales. And as I said in the introduction, we worked with them back in 2015 to create the original version of this guide, and this is our updated version for 2026. Now, I'm not going to bore you by going through every single component of it because I can't remember how many pages we've got in total, but it's quite a lot. It's quite a deep dive. And what I thought I'd do is just go through these kind of core areas that we've got within the document and pick out, I guess for me, what are some of the standout lessons learned or strategies or things that will apply to your work in 2026. So the first part of the guide is about planning with purpose, so getting ready. And one of the big things we always talk about at Third Sector Lab is the importance of measuring real world outcomes. This will probably tie in quite nicely with some of the stuff that Patrick's going to be covering. But what we're trying to avoid is vanity metrics. So terms like I want to raise awareness or someone in your board getting obsessed with how many followers you've got on your Instagram account now. What did that mean in real world terms? How many volunteers did you recruit? Did you see a 15% uplift in donations? Have you seen referrals to that new project that you've committed to do for the big lottery fund? So what are those real world outcomes and how do we measure those? And how much does social media have a part to play in those things that we're trying to achieve? Less is more. So lots of you are probably spread far too thinly across lots of channels. Now, if you are a large organisation like Macmillan or Citizens Advice UK, maybe you've got the luxury of that. Maybe you've got a big digital team and you can effectively manage a TikTok channel, a really thriving email newsletter, your LinkedIn profile, your YouTube channel, your Facebook account, so on and so forth. I could go on and on and on. If you're a very small charity and there's one or two of you, or this is a quarter of your role, probably one or two channels are going to be plenty. And what I'd like you to think when you're using the guide is how do we align audiences, channels, and content, and how do we focus on doing one thing really well for that core audience, and then how do we build from there? So if you feel like you're spinning a lot of plates at the moment, you're probably spinning too many plates. And actually trying to be quite brave in 2026 and taking a step back and thinking, we've got a Facebook account and we post on it every week, but actually we've not seen any increase in fundraising come from our Facebook account. We don't get any volunteers from there, and the community is a bit like tumbleweed. Maybe it's time to close it, or maybe it's time to post once a month. So I'd like you to think about where are those areas that you're going to be spending your time and effort. And one of the nice things in the guide is this notion of content pillars. So this notion that there will be things that you can create time and time again. And it's okay to get into a bit of a rinse and repeat. So if you look at a really nice example I like is the charity Scope, the disability charity, their YouTube channel is really, really clearly focused on content that is advice-based content that they know thousands of people are searching for every day. So how to appeal a PIP decision, for example. And they rinse and repeat that content. They are repurposing content. So content that sits as a guide on their website becomes video advice on their YouTube channel. So making sure you're clear about those content pillars that you've got in your organization. Okay, number two, set. So the boring bit, which people sometimes skip or sometimes have very kind of draconian approaches to. But what I'd like to think about is how do you govern well and then post with confidence. So a simple policy isn't optional. So if you don't have a policy, the guide has some useful stuff in there about creating a policy. If you created a policy 10 years ago and you've not updated it since, this is your time to review and refresh it. Do your staff understand it? Have they even seen it? Is your policy so big that it's become unusable? And culture is where the real change happens. So creating a policy is only part of that jigsaw, but actually do staff own their approach to social media? Do they understand what is okay and what is not okay? Do they understand where what you're doing is social media and social media maybe ties in to some of your approaches to other work? So if a complaint comes in, you've probably got a complaints process that exists already. We don't need a separate social media complaints policy. So using a really simple one or two page social media policy that is about empowering people to communicate on behalf of the organisation, not an IT fair usage policy, which is often where these two things get mixed up. And then the final part of this that I would like everyone to think about, and we can talk about this when we come to the kind of Q&A and the discussion bits, is taking no risks is very risky. So one of the big things that we've seen in the last 5 years, probably beyond, is organic reach has started to drop off a cliff for a lot of charities. You've spent a lot of time building up big communities online, but actually that organic reach is trickier and trickier, and organic reach needs to be part of that paid spend that you're having. Now, if we are simply putting things out that are, we have a thing on Tuesday, please come along to that thing. We have launched a new report, here is a link to a PDF. That is not taking a risk. And so by taking risks, what I'm not saying is that you all need to start swearing on your channels or getting involved in debates that are nothing to do with your organisation. But if you work in subject matter that has controversy or there's big conversations all happening online at the moment around that stuff, do not shy away from it. So one of the things that we're really clear about in the guide is that taking no risks is a very risky tactic. We can pick up on that when we come to the Q&A. I'd love to hear what that looks like for people in the room. Right, number 3, go. So create, publish, build community. So if you ignore everything that I say today, don't ignore the stuff that Holly and Patrick's have got to share because that's useful, but be useful or interesting. That is basically your social media strategy. So are we useful or interesting to the person who might see this thing on this feed today? If we cannot tick one of those boxes, that thing has no place in social media. It is an advert. If it doesn't tick the useful or the interesting box, it's an advert. So getting into that mindset of sense checking, we are not just simply putting something up because I've got 10 emails in my inbox today and I work in a comms team and I've got to please these 10 people and I'm just going to put that stuff. Kaylin's video's back, that's exciting. So we're thinking about how are we useful or interesting and using that as a sense check for any content you put in your channels. Human beats corporate. So the story of, I mean, a really nice example that I always love is the NHS blood transfusions page. So the NHS blood donations page, sorry, they basically have two types of human story and they rinse and repeat those stories. So someone who's received a blood product that saved their life, or someone who's donated blood and is saving someone else's life, and they celebrate those stories. But two types of human story. And I'd like to think about what are your human stories that you can tell. Don't go and spend tens of thousands of pounds on a corporate shiny video when we could be spending less money creating much more raw human content that's going to have much more reach. Okay. Number 4, measure. Learn, improve, and repeat. So we've kind of spoken about this a wee bit already in terms of measuring real world outcomes, but I cannot emphasize that enough. Really, really critical. And that doesn't mean you shouldn't measure anything with your metrics. You shouldn't use the tools that are built into it or using Google Analytics. But everything needs to be tied back to those real world outcomes that sit within the business plan of your organization. And again, a really powerful way of sense checking your strategy. What is in your business plan for your charity for 2026? How do we align everything that we're doing on social media with the things that we're trying to achieve within that business plan? If we're doing things on social media that don't align with the things in that business plan, they are things that we shouldn't be doing. Less is more. In fact, I've repeated this slide. That is my fault. That is a repeat slide. Sorry, it's my fault entirely. Right, I'm going to stop sharing because that's very embarrassing. I've managed to repeat a slide. We've got a chance for a few questions before we get in to Holly's session. So, do you want to pop them in the chat box, or you can simply unmute? And I think Kaylin's going to put in a link to the guide as well. Is that okay, Kaylin? Yeah. Okay. Anyone want to pop a question in the chat box at all? Or unmute and just shout at me, that's okay as well. Okay, Lucy's put in, good to reinforce that less is more. I've got a question for the group. Has anyone in this room closed any of their channels in the last year? Has anyone decided to pull back from a specific channel? Okay, Twitter, there's Lucy. Right, okay. Or X, yeah. Okay, right. Everyone's just like, we don't use Twitter anymore. Right, okay. That's interesting. Blue Sky as well. Kate, do you want to tell us, was that a short experiment with Blue Sky and it's not working for you? Do you want to unmute and tell us? It was Kate Hurst.
Yeah, sorry. So we did decide to go on Blue Sky and come off Twitter because a lot of charities, that seemed to be what they were doing, but that we were just getting no traction whatsoever, like literally nothing. And then there was no analytics or insights set up, so you can't even, see what's working and what isn't. So we just thought for the amount of effort and that it's not, you can't schedule on Hootsuite either.
Yeah.
Just didn't see the point.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I'd be interested to hear what others think in the room. I think Blue Sky has a space in terms of using it as a professional. So it might be that you have a group of people that you connect with on Blue Sky, same way that Twitter used to work, who are in your specialist field of interest. It might just be that you connect with 20 people globally because you work in a really specific part of climate change campaigning, for example, and that's the place where you connect to each other. I am not convinced that Blue Sky yet has a place in terms of broader charity campaigning or broader charity comms and marketing work. That might come with time, but at the moment, I think there's a danger that people are spreading themselves too thinly if they're on that channel, expecting big things to happen as a result of that. Okay. Ruth, do you want to unmute? You said you're interested to think about content aimed at more than one distinct audience group, some clear channel choices, but there's overlap too. Do you want to tell us about that, Ruth?
Yeah, thanks, Ross. Yeah, so we obviously we use LinkedIn for our kind of peer-to-peer networking and targeting potential partner organizations. We do have some brand content aimed at the public and our end users, but there's a bit of a grey area in between where we want to increase brand awareness and talk about what we do to multiple audiences. I think we've got Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn are our kind of key ones. And yeah, sometimes it feels like we're churning out a lot of content on Facebook that is not necessarily just consumer focused. And I think that needs to be okay. But yeah, just interested to hear if there's any kind of tried and tested tips or advice for focusing particular types of content to a particular channel.
Yeah, I would go and encourage it. I mean, we can maybe dig out, I think it may be in the guide, but I can't remember off the top of my head, but Kaelin can maybe dig it out, or Patrick might have a link to it. But Meltwater do a really good UK social media stats update every year. And I've found that really useful in terms of just thinking about how do we align channels with demographics? I think a lot of the kind of global stats are skewed by the state. So if you look at the kind of very generic stats, or if you were to ask like ChatGPT, what you'll tend to find is not as relevant to the United Kingdom. So that for me is always a really powerful starting point in that journey. The other thing that I would say is there's no substitute for just speaking to your users. So speak to the 100 people who are your current volunteers. How did they find out about the opportunity? What are the channels that they use? Speak to your staff teams. Speak to the people who are your community fundraisers. So we need to be spending a lot more time thinking about how we ask questions of the people that we're already engaged with and understanding the channels they use. I think particularly, I mean, we're kind of veering off into kind of content strategy territory, but one of the things that I would say is if you, particularly younger people, like it's like time and time again, I've run hundreds of social media workshops. Everyone who wants to engage with young people really struggles with it where they don't involve young people in that process. And it's probably like the most obvious, easy miss trick. Now, whether it's something like a content takeover on your channels, so Young Women's Movement in Scotland do that really well, or whether it's simply in co-production with young people of that content. What always fails miserably time and time again, and Holly might touch on this a wee bit from her work at RNIB, is trying as someone who is older, like myself, to speak like an under 25 demographic and figuring out what makes them tick. What are they looking for in TikTok? Is actually why do we not just involve them in that process in the first place? So for me, spending that time looking at some of the UK specific stats, like the Meltwater ones, and Kaelin's just put a link to that, the latest one in the chat box, but also then using that in tandem with speaking with your own internal audiences and engaged groups as well.
Thank you, Ross. That's really helpful.
No worries. Nicola's got a question in there around schools and local authorities facing a challenge of how we reach them. I'm going to tell you something that's like the most unsocial media thing ever, but in my opinion, if you want to connect people who work in schools and local authorities, go and find out who the person is that manages the newsletter that those people get. So like if you want to connect with primary schools in South Lanarkshire, go and find out the person at the local authority who manages the newsletter that gets sent to all those primary school teachers on a Monday morning and build a relationship up with them. Get your classroom resources in that newsletter. So this is, I mean, it's an age-old thing of go to where your audiences are, but that applies whether it's a local Facebook group and you want to post your events in it, or whether it's that newsletter that's going to go to all those teachers. But actually, we need to spend a bit of time mapping out where those audiences are already. And there's still, I think, in the charity sector, there's a bit of an obsession about we will create our own channel and everyone will come to us when actually we know those communities are elsewhere already. So if I was going to be trying to get people to fundraise for me and there was a big cycling ETAP event and I had to get 10 people to sign up for it, I'd be better talking to people in cycling groups or working with a person in Devon who's got 40,000 cycling followers on his Instagram than I would be trying to figure out how do I get cyclists to follow my charity. So that concept of going to where your audiences are already is really critical. Right, some good stuff coming in the chat box. Kirsten's one. We talk about aligning content to channel. Would you not suggest posting the same content in many places? Generally not, because your audience on YouTube is probably very different from your audience on LinkedIn, is very different from your audience on Twitter and elsewhere. Now, this is also where having lots and lots of channels when you don't have lots and lots of resources means you kind of fall into the trap of just creating one bit of content and then essentially reposting it in a bunch of places. The young person on TikTok is not the same as the person in that corporate potential partnership that you're trying to connect with on LinkedIn. If all we do is put the same stuff in other places, we're generally going to be pleasing nobody. So my advice would be less channels, less content, but much more of a focus on those specific audiences on those channels. Yep, so some a shout out for some of the tools in the chat box as well. So Buffer, really nice, simple tool. I think Patrick maybe mentioned some tools in his. We've got some in the guide. There's obviously kind of paid for tools like Hootsuite and Sprout Social. If anyone's got any specific tools they want to recommend, do please put them in the chat box. It'd be lovely to hear tools that you're using in your day-to-day work as well. Anyone else? Any final questions before we move on here from Holly? Okay. I'm going to introduce you, Holly, but I think I might end up butchering your surname. Is it Holly Took?
Yeah, it's Holly Tuke. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
It's really hard to say, so
yeah,
don't worry.
Thank you. So Holly's going to be talking to us about accessibility. Holly works for RNIB. And again, after Holly's finished, we'll get a wee chance for some questions for Holly as well.
Thank you so much, Ross. Hi everyone, it is lovely to meet you. I will share my screen in a second, but I thought I'd just kind of do a little bit of a talky intro. So as Ross said, I'm Holly and I am part of the social media team here at RNIB, so the Royal National Institute of Blind People. I am one of a few social media managers within our team. So I have been at RNIB for 4 years now. I started as social media officer and now I'm social media manager, which is really exciting. I'm also registered blind, so I'm going to talk about accessible social media. So my passion for accessible social media is kind of drawn from my lived experience, but also working in comms as well. So kind of, yeah, I've drawn a lot of those two kind of things together and yes, created a real passion for accessible social media. If there's anyone here who is also blind or visually impaired, a little bit of an audio description from me. So I am a white woman. I've got shoulder length brown hair. It's usually straight, but I've got it slightly wavy today. I'm wearing glasses and a black and white kind of jumper, which is crazy because it's been quite cold. And I am in my home office. So now I've done that little bit of a ramble, I will share my screen. And it wants to show.
Gosh.
Kaylin, are you able to confirm whether that's showing in presentation view, please?
Yep, I can see it fine. That's great.
Perfect. Thank you, Ross. So as I said, we're going to look at today some top tips to make your social media content accessible and inclusive for everyone. So I've got a few slides to kind of share some top tips, and then there'll be lots of time after I finish talking for you to ask me questions. Yeah, about kind of anything relating to this, whatever you'd like to. So yeah, we'll get into kind of there's a few tips. I've tried to kind of include as many as I can, but yeah, we'll start off with the background. So something that I think is really important to think about before we kind of get into any of the practical tips is why it's important. So inclusive content says that we want you here too. And I've said we because I think it's really important to kind of think about as organizations, you know, as a disabled person, but then also thinking about from the point of view as non-disabled people as well. It shows that you care about disabled people, blind and partially sighted people, whoever it might be, and basically you're caring about everyone and you're showing that you want us or them here too. And yeah, you showing that kind of empathy and that care. And kind of to put it simply, accessible content means that everyone can join in the conversations, the memes, and all the weird and wonderful things that happen online. So that kind of, when we think about accessibility, that might mean a really important organization announcement, but it also might mean you jumping on a latest TikTok trend, for example, and making that accessible. So whatever it is, always kind of make it accessible. And then we've got an image, and it says accessibility is a love note. It says we want you here too. And that is a pink heart that looks like it's been covered into a via felt tip, and that sits above the copy with the RNIB logo. And that logo is in the right bottom corner. So this is a bit of a mantra in my team. So the accessibility is a love note kind of quote came from some work that I did outside of my job. So I did some writing and was talking about what accessibility means to disabled people and the importance of accessibility, kind of to really hammer home why it's important. And it led to a really nice discussion. And the discussion that came out of that, it is a love note because you're saying people that they care and we care about you and we want you to be included and we want you here. So that's come a bit of a mantra in our NIB social media team because it really embeds everything that we stand for. Again, a final kind of bit of background. So why you should make your social media content. Obviously, we live very busy lives as comms professionals or trustees. Everyone here is really busy and yeah, you've taken out time out of your day to do this, but more widely. Accessibility is sometimes kind of seen as a tick box exercise in a very busy day, but let's flip that on its head. So it shows your commitment to the disabled community and it also makes you an ally. And as a blind person, we love our allies. I can say that for the community. And yeah, it really shows that you are again caring about disabled people. You are making sure that we are included and you want to include us. So you're taking time to add that alt text, to add that video description, to caption your videos. And trust me, we notice. And making your social media accessible is a unique and niche skill that's highly regarded in all spectrums of work. It takes time, it takes learning. So the fact that you put effort into doing it, you've put effort into coming today, you are hopefully learning about accessible social media. That is a skill that you should be really proud of and one that you can take forward into the work you're doing now and into your comms career. So yeah, take it as a skill that's really highly regarded. And in a more serious light, not making your social media accessible can present reputational risks, and it also excludes a large proportion of society. So when we think about being blind or partially sighted, we know that there's many disabilities, but 93% of blind and partially sighted people can see something. So although that stat kind of says, oh, they can see something, that spectrum is really varied. And so if you're adding audio description, for example, if you're adding alt text, then you're making our community feel included. And if you think about reputational risk, if you've got, say, an announcement, for example, and you're not adding alt text or you're not linked to something that's accessible, then people aren't able to access that content and yeah, can present kind of a real challenge, but a real reputational risk as well. So I'm going to get on to some of the practical tips now. And first up, we're going to focus on alt text and image descriptions. So I always kind of say that everyone is at different points on their accessibility journey. Some of you might know all of these tips, but some of you might be at the very beginning and might not have heard of alt text before. And no matter where you're at, that is more than okay. So we'll look at what is alt text. So alt text, or also referred to as alternative text or image descriptions, is a written description of an image, making it accessible to blind and partially sighted people. So it describes everything visually in written form, basically. And you might hear it referred to as alt text, alternative text, or image descriptions, and basically it's the same thing it's all doing the same job. It's primarily for people who use screen readers, and we know that isn't just blind and partially sighted people. That's a real kind of misconception. All blind and partially sighted people only use screen readers. It definitely isn't. Screen readers can benefit people with a cognitive disability, for example, or dyslexia, who might find it really helpful to have the output and rather than reading things on the screen, have it read out for them. And plus, accessibility benefits everyone after all. So yeah, if you're making your content accessible, then you're benefiting everyone. And alt text should give the context of the image in written form. So no matter whether you're accessing it visually or through the written description, it should give the same context. Now, what alt text isn't, because some people think that alt text, you can kind of put things in the box and it's done. But so yeah, let's look at kind of what it isn't. So alt text serves the purpose of accessibility, and it's not for extending your copy. So there is a real kind of tendency for sometimes to put extra copy if you're over a character limit in the alt text box. Definitely do not do this because yeah, that's not its intended purpose. It's also not for inside jokes. So you probably remember a couple of years ago, in Twitter land, there was a meme kind of going round and it was a tick box. And people kind of putting click here, or sometimes people just kind of put jokes into the alt text box just purely for the fun of it. But yeah, you're kind of misusing the accessibility feature there. And it's not for hidden messages either. Again, it's kind of not for that treasure hunt form that you might think it is. So yeah, it's not for that. It's all for accessibility. And it's not for photo credits either. So sometimes rather than putting in the description to make their post accessible, people will use the alt text box for photo credits. I sometimes get really excited when I'm like, oh, someone's added alt text, and then I realize it's just the photo credit. So basically, their top line here is it's always for accessibility. And it's also not a way of slowly boosting search engine optimization or SEO. Now, this is kind of a controversial one because alt text can, of course, help with SEO on websites, but in terms of social media, it doesn't help boost your SEO. So something that I'm asked a lot is, when do I need to include alt text? The simple answer here is alt text should be added to all images, GIFs, and memes. So whenever you're uploading any of those on your social channels, always add alt text, but we'll kind of break that down a little bit. Yeah, so kind of when we think about that, you should definitely add it to every single image you're uploading. So we'll look at kind of that a little bit more in depth. So alt text versus image descriptions, and do I need both? So that kind of links to the previous point. Put simply, alt text lives in the designated alt text box, whilst image descriptions go in the caption after the main copy of your post. So when we think about, do we need both? You should use both alt text and image descriptions on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And this is because these platforms don't have a visible alt text badge. And adding that image description in the copy means that it's visible to everyone. And you might be thinking, well, am I not just repeating it? Then remember kind of that stat that I said earlier, 93% of blind and partially sighted people can see something. So what that means here is people might be using a range of assistive tech. Their vision might fluctuate. So one time they might use the alt text, one time they might maybe read it, and the next time kind of see the image description and kind of look at that. Also, it's making your accessibility more visible. So if you're doing that, then you are showing to everyone that you are making a commitment to accessibility and it's visible, which is always a win. However, on Twitter and Threads, and of course Blue Sky as well, which we've kind of mentioned already, you can stick to only using alt text on there because they have a visible alt text badge. So that means that that it is accessible to everyone and everyone can see it, whether you're using a screen reader or not. When we think about alt text, something that people often get caught up is I don't know what to say. So some tips here are be descriptive, but don't write a novel. You don't need to include every single detail and include the main elements that need to be conveyed. Express your intended message. So if you're sharing some important stats and they're in the image, then they need to be in the alt text so that everyone can access the content the same way. So no matter whether, if the stats are in the image, then write them out in the alt text box. Just take a couple of minutes to do that. And communicate humor. So everyone reading the post can enjoy the joke, because often, say, if we're sharing a meme and there's no alt text, then yeah, people who are relying on the alt text aren't going to understand the joke. And that goes for any emotion as well. And include all text in the image. If there's text in the image, then write it all out in the image description or the alt text. Something I see a lot is just the word screenshot of article or graphic. And I'm like, well, what is the screenshot? What's this graphic? So yeah, just write it all out, because I promise you that taking a bit of extra time to do that will make such a massive difference. And it's a real win for accessibility. If you're struggling with alt text, we've got lots of images and you might not necessarily know where to start. Something to think about is just think, how would I want this image described to me? You can, kind of think about, how would I want it described to me? What would I want to know? And kind of ask yourself, what's the details that I would want to know? What are people doing? What's the joke? Is there any emotion that needs to be conveyed? And I've got an example of alt text here. And it says, so it's a screen grab of a tweet from RNIB from last year's Strictly Come Dancing. I thought I'd pick that out because it feels quite relevant right now. So it's a screen grab of Chris and Diane's Strictly performance on Wayne's World. And the copy in the tweet says, swing, your jive was excellent. And then Chris and Diane, that glitter ball will be yours. Oh yes, it will be yours. Hashtag Strictly Come Dancing. And then we've got an image description, which is excellent. Wayne from Wayne's World is holding his thumb up in an ear to ear towards someone off, eyes half shut towards someone off camera. And then there is some text that reads, sorry, my screen reader has jumped. So the baseball cap reads Wayne's World, and there's then a black t-shirt that he's wearing as well, and his straight dark brown hair falls onto his shoulders. So here you can tell kind of we've described the outfit, but we've also kind of given context of what it is. And now we're going to move on to some other accessibility tips, which are hashtags, emojis, and video accessibility. So for hashtags, the really important thing here is to use camel case. So camel case, also known as Pascal case, refers to capitalizing the first letter of each word, and it ensures that hashtags are read out correctly by screen readers, and it also makes them easier to read. And then we've got an image here, and it's a blue background with the hashtag in camel case. And it's the Susan album party hashtag, which I'm sure you're familiar with, and that's got a tick next to it. And then we've got Susan album party at the bottom of the image, and that's all in lowercase, and there's a cross next to that. And then we've got a shocked looking kind of face in the middle. So yeah, not doing kind of the intended thing here is not doing camel case can lead to some embarrassing PR disasters. So be mindful of your hashtag use. So limit hashtags to one per post to maximum, and that's because screen readers read out everyone. and don't use them one after the other unless right after the end of your post. So yeah, screen readers have to listen and navigate between hashtags, and it's pretty tedious if you're navigating tons of hashtags. And now we are going to look at emojis. And so did you know that screen readers read out the name of every single emoji that you include in your copy? So a few top tips. Limit emojis to 1 per post, 2 maximum, and don't put them between each word. So there's often posts that go around on socials that have the clappy hands emoji between each word. So yeah, that is pretty annoying. Don't use them one after the other, and don't use a different emoji for each bullet point, because yeah, it can be quite distracting. Sometimes it can be quite helpful to read, but for screen reader users, it can really kind of get quite tedious. And also be mindful of emoji names and don't rely on them to get a message across. So you might think that crying, laughing emoji is one thing, but a screen reader will say face with tears of joy. So yeah, just think about the descriptions of the emojis that you're using. If ever you're in doubt, then Emojipedia is a really good resource to check descriptions and the intended use of an emoji. And now we're going to look at video accessibility. So always add subtitles to your videos. It's not just people who are deaf or hard of hearing who find captions useful. And always aim for audio-led or audio described videos, and always read out the text on screen. Your funky visuals might look good and the music might kind of sound really nice, but it's not accessible. So make them visually accessible by captions and audibly accessible by audio-led or audio described. So I've got a few kind of other handy tips as well, and just kind of a few things to think about around kind of copy. So yeah, kind of thinking about things like I've skipped a slide here, but thinking about capitals. So don't overuse capitals. Don't put too many links, just stick to one, and those kind of things. And now I am going to stop talking, and I'm going to let kind of you all ask me some questions. And I will
Brilliant,
stop
Holly.
sharing.
That was great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I will have a wee look through the chat box and see what we've got. So, sorry, there's quite a few images, so I'm just trying to scroll through. Next one from Marina. Marina, do you want to unmute and you could ask it yourself?
Hi, I'm not sure that people will understand my accent, but like I'm basically asking, many platforms now create automatic alternative text. Does it still worth writing your own text? And which platform work best with manual alternative text?
Really good question. Thank you, Marina. Yeah, in terms of automatically generated alt text, so this is mainly on Facebook, Instagram, and Threads, and so Meta platforms. And the really simple answer to this is yes, it's always worth writing your own manual, human-centered, human-written alt text, because the manually artificially intelligence generated alt text isn't the most reliable and it's not descriptive. So if we were thinking about someone taking a selfie in a park, it's the only kind of one I can think of at the top of my head. It would say something along the lines of maybe an image of one person, selfie, grass, and nature. I know that because I hear it a lot. So yeah, it's not kind of giving context of their outfit, whether they're smiling, what's in the background. So yeah, it's really basic. So always take their time to write your own alt text on every platform. But that's a great question. Thank you.
Brilliant, thanks so much. Nicola's got a good question about videos and asking how can we make sure our video content is as accessible as possible. So yeah, any quick top tips, Holly?
Yeah, so add subtitles. So white text on black background is always good. It's always kind of really helpful to kind of use that when you can, because it's best for readability and accessibility. Making them audio led or audio scribed. So like I mentioned, I can give kind of a bit of a breakdown here. So audio led is where the message of the video is sent, gives the same message both audibly and visually. So no matter kind of how you're watching, it's often embedded into the script, for example, or the conversation or whatever it might be. And audio described is when there's a track kind of overlaid. So it could be a voiceover, for example, describing the visuals and exactly what's going on. So it could be kind of people's facial expressions, what they're doing, and that kind of thing. I'd say if you want an example of audio description, head to your favorite film or TV show on your favorite streaming platform. See if it's got audio description. It'll often either say AD or audio description. Just turn it on for a couple of minutes and you'll know exactly what's happening. And that's kind of what you should be aiming for in terms of audio description for your videos. And then also as well, if you're having text on screen, make sure that is all presented audibly. And yeah, I think as well, like not making music too loud so that we can hear all of the stuff that's happening audibly and know kind of what's going on visually as well. And yeah, just thinking about like background noise, lighting, and those kind of things as well. I hope that helps.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Holly. Right. There's a question from Andrea. Are there built-in screen readers with Android, Apple, Google, Windows, etc. that people already have, or do you need special software?
Great question. And so yes, there are built-in screen readers on all of those devices. So Apple is called VoiceOver, which is available on all Apple products. So things that you might use on a daily basis, like a Mac, an iPhone, an iPad. It's in accessibility settings. Just be mindful that you're going to have to navigate, say, on the iPhone and the iPad with very different gestures to what you would visually, but it's a really good test. You can also use speak screen on Apple devices as well, and it will read out kind of with a swiping gesture that you do, that it'll read out the stuff on the screen audibly, so that can be quite helpful. On Android, you've got TalkBack, and again, yeah, kind of that will change the way you navigate your phone, but you can kind of switch it on to make sure that your content is accessible, or if you want to see something that has alt text. Windows, you've got Narrator, and again, you navigate via the keyboard as you would on a Mac. So those are kind of all free built-in tools that are at your fingertips, which you can test your content. You can see if people's content is accessible. And yeah, I'd recommend kind of taking a few minutes to kind of look at shortcuts or gestures to kind of test your content. I'd say if you've got a Windows computer at your disposal, then start with Narrator, because yeah, that's a really good place to start. And yeah, you can kind of look at that, and yeah, it feels probably the most easiest for people who haven't dipped into screen reader world before. So yeah, definitely kind of look at that, and it's always really good to test content with a screen reader, and you can learn a lot.
Brilliant. Thank you, Holly. Okay, okay. I think that is all the questions that come from chat. Kaelan, have I missed any that have come in?
I can see my colleague Joe in our wonderful Scotland comms team has been sharing a few things in the chat, so thank you, Joe.
Yeah, that's been great. That's been really good, really useful. Brilliant. Thank you so much, Holly.
Thank you.
Okay.
I can put our accessible social media guide in the chat as well, if that'd be helpful for
amazing.
some
Yes, that'd be
tips.
excellent. Yeah.
Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Holly. Okay, okay. Right. Our final speaker is Patrick Dawson from Meltwater. Patrick's going to be talking all things measurement, and he's got some other stuff. And again, we'll get a chance for Q&A afterwards as well.
We're not quite there. Still morning all, soon to be afternoon. Today I am going to be speaking to you guys about social media planning and measurement. Now, I think it aligns really well with the media guide that you'll be receiving. But I just wanted to really pick out a couple of simple tips and tricks to help you along your way. Before we get started, maybe get to know each other. To explain the photos here, back in, I think it was middle of COVID, I was asked to do some training programs, and as a proud Yorkshireman, tea seems to be synonymous with me. So I had a friend in graphic design who was apparently pretty quiet during the time of COVID. Knocked me up a couple of honey pictures. PD tips is what we'll be talking about today. But from a more contextual approach. Myself, I'm from Wakefield, so not a million miles away from where Holly's currently sat in York. I live in Edinburgh, have done for 4 years now. Really pleased to be here. I personally am a huge supporter of a charity called Bone Cancer Research Trust. Due to a family loss a good few years ago, 18 years ago, but me and my family very, very close supporters of BCRT. So to be honest, any charity support is good support. And on a personal note, outdoor sports, music, and tea. And if you were in any doubt, I do have a cup of tea with me. Hopefully you do too. Now, really where my field of expertise lays is within Meltwater. I'm a senior enterprise account director. Now, that's a lot of words without a lot of meaning. So again, to contextualize that, I have the pleasure of working with clients. Now, each client has usually a set of challenges, and Meltwater Solutions come to present a solution. With that, we have a lot of exposure, and through the years, as Ross had mentioned, we start releasing things like data releases, surveys, and reports that just give a little guide on the state of play in any given time, normally on an annual basis. We've recently released one around AI in social media as well, so maybe that's one worth looking at, and I can share those links later. But a few stats I pulled out just to really kind of set the scene here. Only 48% of organizations describe themselves as intermediate, and actually a tiny fraction of brands see themselves as advanced social media users. So if you don't feel like you're in the intermediate or advanced camp, don't worry. Actually, the vast majority don't. But I think really important message here, as Ross had kind of said at the top of the call, just start somewhere. I think it's really important to just get motion in the ocean, because building awareness, engagement is always good for that end objective. And we'll talk about objectives later. And then there's brand awareness being the top goal. So for all social media users in the businesses we surveyed, raising brand awareness is the key objective. I think that will be something similar here, right? Going to be hard to create conversions without initial exposure. And then finally, social media will play a more important role. Still today, if we think back in 2007 was really when most usage came to be, we're a long way on, and 78% still say social media will play a more important role. It's not a declining asset. It is still climbing, and really important that we take this opportunity forwards. So for today, it's about taking some of these stats and learning some simple tricks to create efficient strategies for maximizing social value. I talked about the opportunity to work with clients. I've pulled some out that I'm familiar with. Stonewall was an LGBTQ plus rights charity. And their goal with social media is empowering individuals, transforming institutions, changing minds and hearts. And the social media managers share that it's important to set realistic but challenging KPIs. That's going to be a thread today about KPIs. Ross had mentioned about vanity metrics. No good just talking about we got 10 likes on that post. It's what is that leaning towards? It wants to be a more holistic approach to conversion. Second, Focus Island, so the largest homeless and housing charity in Ireland. They went through a rebrand, and they used social media data to look at the impact of that rebrand. But they did so in a qualitative way. Social media manager there said, I look at the data in a qualitative way, so not just the total number of mentions, but also the kind of mentions. So even think about the sentiment, the tone of that mention. And that's actually something that we can use tools, even free tools like ChatGPT, to start helping us curate a certain sentiment and tone in our messaging. And then time to change. This was a collaboration between Mind and another charity that slips my mind. But a growing movement of people challenging how we think and act about mental health. And again, their real centerpiece is storytelling and doing so digitally. And we work with them, and they shared that user-generated content becomes a massive focus in their campaigning. And that's something I will also talk about today slightly. It's just about how we can leverage our own communities, our volunteer networks, even just posts that have been posted and we might not even know they existed previously, but do leverage pre-made content because it's going to take a lot of weight off your shoulders in building that awareness for the brand. So today we'll break it into a few simple parts. Planning for purpose, measurement, which is obviously going to include third-party key metrics, and then just a few free takeaways that we'll come away with. I'll be sharing this deck afterwards, so no need to write in a frenzy. There's also a link to a different spreadsheet I've created with, I think, 67 different tools that you can get involved with for different elements, like even video creation or content creation. So planning for purpose, I think hopefully we're familiar with SMART goals, but if not, SMART stands for specific, measurable, actionable, relevant, and time-bound. And what I would suggest here is before you set off on your journey, try and find that North Star. What are you trying to achieve? An example of this could be attracting 25 new volunteers via Facebook. Another example could be a fundraising initiative, £3,000 through Instagram donations. But do have a specific goal, because that's how we're going to start creating this feedback loop where we can iterate and develop our strategies. The second is knowing your audience. For me, it's a very simple slide and probably one of the more interesting and challenging discussion points. So knowing your audience, I think for some of you, you'll be trying to change maybe policy. Some of your content will be simple fundraising initiatives. Others, I think I've already mentioned, trying to find partners. But the audience landscape has changed, as does society and our own social culture. So we used to work in a community basis. I think then that segmented down. We had quite a bipolar society and kind of a two-thought process. And actually where we live now in today's modern world is a very fragmented society. And that plays through into our social media landscape as well. So if you think about trying to approach younger generations, older generations, and all these different audience stakeholders, ultimately they're all going to sit in different channels, different forums, different networks. So really important to have a spread of strategy. So don't just rely on a Facebook or an Instagram. I think it's important to cross a few of those, if not just a couple. But as Ross said again at the top, be quite specific with what you're trying to achieve in that. Don't go machine gun approach and go to all channels with the same content. That isn't going to work. There is no silver bullet, but do appreciate that audience will exist in different places. Then there's choosing the right platforms. For those that aren't on the big five, we'll call them. Facebook, really great space for community engagement and storytelling. Instagram, visual storytelling. Again, visual content generally has had a uptick as a trend. People like engaging with photos. It might be a really quick win. LinkedIn for partnership and professional credibility. But I think in today's age, YouTube and TikTok might have a really impact. A big impact for you. Video creation generally is on the uptick. It's a clear winner when we survey our clients. I think the last time we took a survey of about 500 companies, and 78% of respondents prioritize video posting, followed by carousels on Instagram and TikTok. Now, okay, there is different demographic on the audience. Is TikTok or YouTube great for younger audiences? Great for educational storytelling. And something like YouTube, that longer form storytelling usage is climbing again. And Ross, actually, I think in the social media guides that you guys will have access to, talks a lot about trust building. And trust building generally is seen to be built through video content now. That trust building having continuous engagement with your charity is going to build an assurance for volunteers and donors. So make sure that you're consistent and do lean on video content. It's getting even easier now with some AI tools, but potentially new avenue if you haven't tried it already. I just wanted to pull some stats from some of the studies we did because it might give you a little insight into how the big corporates are working. It's not all big corporates, by the way. There are NGOs in here as well. So the green line that you can see is 2024. The purple line is 2025, and this is looking at levels of investment into different channels. So this one is where are companies investing more? And you can see in the image and the video domains, so Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube, there is an increase year on year in the level of investment going in. So again, this is where big corporations or well, most businesses actually across the survey are finding more engagement, more awareness is going to be built. The opposite is said, and it was really nice to hear at the top of this call. It sounds like we've got some people with their finger on the pulse. Where are companies investing less? And again, X or formerly Twitter, definitely. So Twitter is a resounding. It seems to be a bit of a tsunami, to be honest. Most conversations I have don't involve Twitter or X anymore. But across the board, yeah, I would say X is a sliding investment. Number 4, this is content planning. Now, I won't get into the weeds of it. I think the social media guide will give you a bit more information here. But again, just some tips, right? You can use scheduling tools. I think a few have been mentioned, whether it's a Sprout or a Hootsuite or a Buffer. Try and get ahead of it, even in a professional context. You know, sometimes I might even think about, how do I post on for my next week? I might sit there on a Sunday afternoon with a cup of tea and post out something informative for the next week. The same strategy could exist for you guys. It doesn't need to be in the minute. And I think if you start to build out the way you work with social media, if you are involving volunteers, if you're looking at your community to reshare content, take that time to aggregate the information, pick out your top content, and then schedule it out. Much easier to schedule 5 days worth of content in one sitting than it is to come back and do it every day. So include post copy visuals, links, and objectives in your calendar. Again, why are you doing this? We talked, Ross had mentioned, try and make it informative or useful. Don't just post content. It needs to land with a certain purpose. And there are free tools, right? Facebook Creator Studio or Trello to schedule posts. Even some of you using tools like Buffer, Sprout, or Hootsuite, which is excellent. And then there's the feedback loop. I think this is where it all comes back together. So Meltwater in our social media playbook called it plan, act, measure, learn, adjust. So in that planning phase, that's simply looking at the information that we have available to us to plan and curate information. Act is the execute. To measure, looking at the response to that, the performance of that posting. What can we learn from it? I think this is actually where we can leverage historical information, and I'm going to come back to that. And then adjusting the strategy. So what are the takeaways from this? Why didn't it perform as well? Or why did it perform as well? And not only this is very much we're talking about on a introspective brand position, but learn from your perceived competitors or market peers. Have a look at what other charities are doing, or Ross had already mentioned blood donation, NHS blood donors. Like, what content are they pushing? How are people building trust? So if that's one of your objectives, have a look at the market space, see what's out there, and try and build it into your own plan. And then measurement. So I'll simplify this. I always like to simplify ideas. So when we think about an execution plan, execute, evaluate. So that 5 steps I've just baked into a 3-step plan. Now, the reason for using this, what looks like a recycling wheel, is because this is not an start and end or open and shut project. Social media isn't a one-stop campaign. It should be a constant iteration. And the reason why it's a constant iteration is because if we move ourselves to the right of the screen and we think about this more of a funnel. So when we think of a funnel and we're thinking about the purpose of the top of the funnel, we are trying to build awareness. And why are we building awareness? Because we want to create an action. That action can be anything from volunteering, it can be anything from donors, it can be changing policy and legislation. And that really then becomes the conversion. How many volunteers did we gain? How much did we fundraise? How have we impacted policy and legislation? Now, the reason for the iteration is because when you start to tweak your data points, you will start impacting different levels of the funnel. You will be able to create more awareness by creating better content. That then should follow down to a conversion of every 100 engagements we get on social media equals 1 volunteer sign up. So what happens if we create 200 engagements? So that's what we want to try and achieve. It becomes very methodical. It's almost a formula for conversion. So interesting to think about it in this context. We've talked a lot already about just not random posting, but strategic planning. Now, to do that, I think we can start to think about 3 key metrics. Awareness, not just a vanity metric. This isn't about just a like. It's about a systematic approach to getting your message in front of the people you want to get in front of. So how many people saw your message? Unfortunately, for social media managers or anybody on this call, you may know that each channel doesn't look at kind of awareness, reach, and impressions in the same way. So you just have to maybe plan to your social channel. If you think about X looks at will give you an impression number based on how many times your post is on a feed. Instagram quite clearly is quite a clean metric, which is how many people have seen your post, but it's not the same for everybody. Then there's the engagement, again, part of this funnel. So you're trying to create awareness with your post. How many then engagements can we create from that post? But it is all part of that funnel because on the right-hand side is the action. This attributes to things like link clicks, signups, donations. This is really where you get that outcome. And in the social media world, ROI is always the key question. What is that return of your investment, either financially or in time? And these are the simple triggers that we want to start working with. So when we think about what to measure, definitely look at reach and impressions. I would then correlate that against things like your engagement. So your likes, your shares, your comments, your reactions. But fundamentally backtrack that back down to your conversions. There is also the sentiment piece on top of this. This again can be completely outside of your own domain. If you think about a topic around homelessness, thinking back to the charity use case earlier, what news is surrounding homelessness in Ireland at a given point in time? If there is an uptick and you're seeing that in the media space, jump on the back of it. Ross talked about taking a risk. Don't wait for a very safe kind of social post about an upcoming webinar. You should jump on these social scenarios, let's call them. You should jump into current narratives and propel them, maybe even share the news articles yourself, because driving sentiment, if it's going to have a positive value for you, is really important. But I would also say from a measurement piece, we can overcomplicate it. You can buy into lots of tools. And I'm not trying to do myself out of a sale here, guys. I do sell these softwares, but there's lots of amazing information out there that you can get free of charge. If you use the native platforms, my advice here would be download the data. Have a look at it month on month. If you created this monthly ritual for how many impressions and likes and posts did we create? What was our website visit data? How much donation did we receive? Now, if you start creating a very metrics-based approach like this, you can constantly iterate and create that feedback loop, as we say. But a lot of that information already exists at your fingertips. It can be a little trickier to get to. That's why a solution like Meltwater ultimately exists to aggregate that information and present it in very nice dashboards, but it is there. But I'm just on to the third point here, which is note audience questions. So understand what your community is asking to guide your content strategy. Again, listen, see what narratives are emerging. If it's a question coming through on a frequent basis, it might be something on a much wider conversation as well. So let's leverage that, take that risk to keep posting and answering these in a meaningful way. And then a couple of ideas just to plan for shortcuts. This is the last couple of slides here for real information, but I'm a huge advocate of repurposing content. I think there's I think 30 in one of our studies, one of the biggest challenges, I think 38% of respondents said resource is their biggest challenge. And again, that's outside of this forum. Again, this is even in big corporates. So how do you then maximize your efficiency? Well, you don't have to be the one to post. Try and find ways to gain access to your community, to reposition some of that content, repost it. So turning existing assets like annual reports into infographic carousels or case studies into short reels saves time and ensures consistent messaging. The efficiency piece here speaks for itself. It's going to save you the time. But if you can, I'm just changing into an example here to involve your volunteers in content. If you can create for example, a WhatsApp group for volunteers, and you set an agenda to say, can you give us one post with a 20-word caption on a weekly basis? If you get enough people doing that, you're going to have a repository, a really strong repository of content to repurpose, which might then help you in this result, which is creating an authentic, low-cost content strategy, which then should keep driving that funnel and a stronger performance on the back of it. And I'm just going to give a shout out to ChatGPT a second. I use it daily. I don't know if you guys are there yet, but AI in my world is a daily discussion. It is not going anywhere. I think OpenAI, who own ChatGPT, have just announced they're going to gear up for $1 trillion IPO in 2027 or something. So it certainly isn't going anywhere. So let's use the tools that are available to us. And a couple of examples I just wanted to bring forward. When you're trying to think of analyzing your information, you could do something like if you've downloaded your last 6 months worth of social media data, you actually have the ability to upload that data into something like ChatGPT and say, please analyze it for me. Please help me understand which of my posts in the last 6 months have generated the best performance. Because ultimately, the posts with the highest performance are going to be the ones that we want to repurpose. Was it the context? Was it the text? Was it the image style because it had a dog or a cat in it and everybody loves dogs and cats and donations going to fly through the roof? But it's an amazing opportunity to get somebody else to do the legwork for you. So I know in the social media guide, it talks about the kind of this evolution of AI. So have a look at that. Make it, I'm not saying central to your workflows, but do involve it. It's really important. But you can also ask more direct questions towards your channel. So in the bottom right-hand side, I've written grow your channels with AI. So an example here will be my Instagram account is X. First look at my Instagram account and read the content on my profile from the last 3 months and remember it. Now I'll send you a link to another account. So again, I talked about competitors or peers in your space. Here's a competitor brand. Here's the link. Please help me understand what I can do to increase my engagement in a similar way. Brilliant. So somebody else might already have gone through the iteration process. They might have gone through the pain of investing money to drive engagement and awareness. Now we can learn from that process free of charge. So I always like to think of it when it's a crisis, it's how do you learn from somebody's expensive mistake? But it's a similar process when it's about building brand awareness. How do you learn from somebody else's investment? And this is a great way to do it. And then just, I talked about some free toolings to help you along your way. There are your native analytics. I would say use them if you don't. Somebody like Meltwater, we can help you. But if you're more budget strict, then absolutely get involved with your native analytics. But I would say if you're not doing anything, certainly start here. From here, we can also then start leveraging different toolings. So I've pulled together a list of ChatGPT I've just mentioned. Even with those CSVs that you download, a CSV is like an Excel spreadsheet for those that aren't aware. You can upload it into ChatGPT. We've already talked about Buffer as a free social media management tool, as with Sprout, as with Hootsuite. Or if you're looking for more content generation from either video, image, text, there are alternatives like a Blaze AI, which is a content generator specialized in brand voice. So again, if you can give it some context to say, this is what I'm trying to achieve, it will generate the content for you. It's a wonderful world we live in. But I have actually pulled together a list of, I think, 67 AI tools, including the descriptions, their costs, and links. So if you want to have a look at what available tools out there can do for you, please do take a look. It's all there. So the key takeaways just from my section are start small and consistent. I think just start if you're not. Don't go into a single channel strategy. I think a multi-threaded approach is probably best to reach a wider audience. Make sure that the metrics you're using are aligned to your mission. So again, think of this more of a funnel and a consistent funnel flowing. What you're putting in at the top in terms of your awareness and building engagement and brand voice, how does that then correlate to conversions at the bottom of the funnel? Constantly iterate that process. Do so by creating a monthly review or a weekly, however active you are in your social strategy. But remember, listening and learning from the process is going to create stronger outcomes. Thank you so much, everyone. That's all for me, and very open to questions.
That was brilliant, Patrick. Thank you so much. There's so much in there, and we'll make sure slides get out to people as well, because there's tons of resources that have gone in there. Now, we've got some questions that have come in the chat box. Andrea's got a good one. Do you have any top tips for self-care with social media? I don't like social media that much. Charities I volunteer with want to use it to engage with their audiences.
Can I just get a explanation on the question? So regarding self-care, can you just explain that bit for me?
Yeah, I don't know, Andrea, do you want to come on? I'm assuming, I don't want to speak to you, Andrea. I take it you mean in terms of like some of the terrible content that we see on channels at the moment, but if Andrea's still in the room, do you want to unmute and let us know?
Yeah. Yeah, I suppose I don't like social media for all the, you don't know whether you're interacting with a real person or a bot. I volunteer in domestic abuse and sexual harms. So there's lots of nasty debates at the moment, very toxic atmosphere, it feels like, on social media. And I don't like it. But as I say, that's where our audiences are. So I feel like I sort of have to engage with something that I really don't like. So are there any magical silver bullets to help me feel better and navigate this horrible world?
Great question, Andrea. And unfortunately, I think in all our worlds, a social bullet does not exist, which is the bad news, right? I bring it back down to my point about measuring your outcome. So if you just see the post as a conduit towards that end goal, are you reaching that by posting? You can then make a decision. A lot of people on this in this forum have already talked about something like a blue sky, just weren't seeing conversion or engagement, or so then just came back off it. Okay, that's fair enough. It might be the same for you. I'm not sure where you're posting. But I would, if you're not seeing any return, tweak your strategy. Like use the information available to you. Maybe increase the volume of posting or change the content that you're pushing. and just try and have a little play. It's all levers. I can't say there's a silver bullet. I appreciate social media is the Wild West at times. But I just would say keep going, use data to drive your pivots. And just make sure it's kind of North Star orientated. Find your objective and see if you're getting closer to it. But apologies, I don't have the silver bullet.
Yeah,
Oh,
probably.
no. Well,
Sorry.
that's good. Think of the audience, think of the why, and that'll get me through it. Thank you.
Yeah, it probably ties in quite nicely. Lizzie's got a question about how do we keep staff safe from bad actors. So we've got some stuff in the guide about creating a simple policy for your staff, and within there, knowing the difference between someone who has a perfectly valid question and someone who is simply looking to troll you, that those are not the same thing. Patrick, I don't know if you've got any thoughts on that.
Oh, no. There are you cannot prevent bad actors, particularly not if you're in a public facing space. There are certain tools you can get which you can automate a kind of the processing of content as it comes in. But if you're in an open landscape, it's going to be pretty tough to get rid of the noise.
Yeah, yeah, totally. Right, a final one from Nicola, and we'll probably finish up on this one. So, and I'll open this up to Patrick, Holly, Kaelin as well. So, any advice for someone with no social media background trying to fit in the time around my actual job? Hiring someone isn't the option at the moment. Struggle for time and lack of experience doesn't help. End up posting the same content across platforms, which I know isn't good. And then she's putting at the end, was considering using Blaze AI, would you recommend? So yeah, Patrick, you want to pick up that one first, and then maybe see if Holly and Kaelin have got any thoughts on that one.
Yeah, sure. I was having this conversation with my mother-in-law recently. She set up a baking business, and she's trying to flog her buns, which again, my message to her was start, right? I think no need to go too widespread on the number of channels you're working across. Start looking at 2 channels. Find a frequency that works for you. There are lots of tools available. Blaze AI, sure, like it's a good tool, but there are also loads. So easier said than done. You haven't got all the time in the day to search for every single tool, but maybe ask this forum what's working really well. There are your Hootsuites and your Sprouts as well, right? What would be my advice? Yes, find a couple of platforms. Make sure that you understand how to engage the audiences. Are using hashtags, for example? Can you get involved in certain other discussions that are appealing to the content of the audience you're trying to engage? Social media has really complex algorithms, so it will find a way to present your content to the people that should be seeing it. So try and find your way towards that audience. And again, just let data do the decision making for you. So my advice there would be pretty methodical with the way you reflect on your performances. But I'm not sure how long you've been going, but don't give up too soon. It can be easy enough to do it for 2 weeks and then not see a return and give in. Social media doesn't work like that at all. You just keep building, and take iterations slowly but surely.
Thanks, Patrick. Holly, anything you want to come in with on that one?
Yeah, sure. I definitely agree with everything Patrick has said. I'd say look at community engagement as one. So what kind of are the community talking about? Can you pull any content from that? How are you engaging with your community is a really important one. And yeah, there's often so much that can be fed from our communities. And also look at what's working well. So if you've posted something and it's got really good metrics and it's got really good reach and engagements, for example, how can you repurpose that in the future? And then think about as well evergreen content. I know Patrick touched on it earlier, but think about what can you reuse or what can you maybe slightly modify to change the intended purpose that fits with, say, something you might work on for a campaign or a project because it works well before. So there's no harm in taking that again and learning from it and reusing it either in the same way or just a different way. I think we often think that we've got to do entirely different outputs, but evergreen content is just as important as kind of the reactive stuff.
Yeah, that's brilliant, Ollie. Thank you. It's really useful. Keelan, any final thoughts from you on that?
Yeah, I think just kind of adding on to what both Holly and Patrick said there, I think that you can look across the work that you're doing if you take an open working approach, actually just going on social media and saying, this is what we're up to. It doesn't take so long to produce that content, and being transparent in that way is a really good way to start getting things out there. The other thing is just encourage your colleagues. Go and ask them what they're up to, lean on them, encourage them to tell you what they're up to send over something they've read or they've seen. It can be linking to someone else even, but that's a really great way to start, not just having to use your own time and be stressed with trying to figure out what you're going to post. Lean on other people, use AI. If you have a good piece of content or a good piece of work, use AI, like Holly was saying, to repurpose that, change the framing, put it in a different format, and just really expand on what you're already doing. There's loads of pieces of content that you can pull from what you're doing in the day-to-day that you probably don't even realize that you can use. So I would say just think about using an open working framework and yeah, just leaning on those around you to kind of pull content from.
Brilliant. Thank you, Kaelin. Yeah, I'm going to finish up there because it's 1:30. I think the big thing, and hopefully the thing that you'll find with the guide, is framing social media as a tool to get your job done. So yes, it can be difficult when it feels like this is a job, it's a 20th of my current job, but all sense checking, is this going to help me get my job done? And if it can't, we don't do it. The same way that, like, am I sense checking the emails that I'm sending this week or the meetings that I'm going to, or if you're a local charity, maybe putting posters up in local shops. They're all part of a bigger picture of, does it help us get our job done as a charity? And just thinking about it in those really simple terms. Right, thanks so much for coming along. Thank you so much to Holly and Patrick for offering their expertise and their insights, incredibly useful. If you use the link that we've shared in the chat box, you'll find the guide on Third Sector Lab website, and it'll eventually be on the OSCR website as well. Thank you so much. And we've got some more training coming up at Third Sector Lab. So if you click on the training tab, you can sign up for the training we've got coming up soon. Thank you so much, and enjoy your lunch and the rest of your week, everyone. And I'll see you all soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Cheers, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Holly. That was great. Thanks, Patrick.